Chapter 1, New Beginnings. Emily stepped off the plane at JFK Airport, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement, nerves, and anticipation. The moment she had been dreaming of for years was finally here. She was in New York City, ready to start a new chapter of her life. But as she looked around at the throngs of people rushing through the terminal, she felt a pang of anxiety. The noise, the fast pace, the sheer size of everything, it was overwhelming. The hustle and bustle of New York was like nothing she had ever experienced back in her small town in France. The airport was a maze of signs and announcements, all in rapid, sharp English that seemed to blur together. She clutched her carry-on bag a little tighter, mentally rehearsing the phrase she had prepared. "Could you please tell me where the baggage claim is?" But when she finally approached an airport staff member, the words didn't come out as smoothly as she had hoped. "Could you please tell me where the baggage claim is?" she asked, her French accent thick and pronounced. The staff member smiled kindly, but Emily noticed a flicker of hesitation in her eyes as she processed the question. Emily realized her mistakes immediately. She had pronounced could, missing the subtle L sound. Please had come out as please instead of please, and baggage had become bagas with a soft sound instead of the correct dj sound. The word had turned into a drawn-out ease, rather than the short, crisp is it should have been. After a brief pause, the woman pointed Emily in the right direction, saying, "The baggage claim is just past customs, near the arrival gate." Emily listened carefully, noting how the woman pronounced baggage with a clear dish sound, and how is was a quick, almost throwaway word. As she walked away, Emily felt a flush of embarrassment wash over her. She had always been proud of her English skills back in France. She was often the one friends turned to for help with translations or English homework. But here, surrounded by the fast-talking New Yorkers with their crisp, confident speech, she realized the challenge might be bigger than she had anticipated. She followed the signs to customs, where the officers were brisk but polite. The words "purpose of your visit" and "duration of stay" echoed in her mind as she handed over her passport. She noticed how the officers' R sounds were much more pronounced than what she was used to, especially in purpose and duration. The way he said visit was also different, a clear Z sound instead of the S sound she would have used. After a few quick questions, she was through and headed toward the baggage claim area. The sense of relief she felt when she finally spotted her suitcase on the carousel was quickly overshadowed by the realization that she now had to navigate the next step of her journey, finding a taxi stand and making her way to her new apartment. As Emily stepped outside the airport, the cool air hit her face, and she was greeted by a sea of yellow cabs. She approached the nearest taxi and repeated to herself, "Taxi stand, taxi stand, taxi stand," focusing on the KS sound in taxi and the clear D at the end of a stand. "Where to?" the taxi driver asked in a thick New York accent, catching her slightly off guard. The way he said "where" was almost like "weh," with a dropped R sound that Emily hadn't expected. Emily hesitated for a moment, then responded, "I'm going to Manhattan, near Central Park." She concentrated on pronouncing Manhattan with a clear T sound in the middle and a slightly nasalized A at the end, mimicking what she had heard in American movies. The driver nodded and started the meter. As they pulled away from the airport, Emily looked out the window, taking in the city she had dreamed about for so long. The taxi ride was both thrilling and intimidating. The driver navigated through the chaotic streets with ease, occasionally chatting with someone over the radio in rapid-fire New York English that Emily could barely follow. "So, you're in the city for work?" he asked casually, his eyes still on the road. "Yes," Emily replied, trying to mimic the driver's strong R sound as she spoke. "I just arrived today." She was pleased with how she managed to roll the R in arrived, though she knew it still didn't sound quite right. The driver nodded again, his voice rhythmic as he responded. "Welcome to New York. It's a busy place, but you'll get used to it. We're just a few blocks away from your destination near Central Park. You'll love it there, nice and close to everything." Emily quietly repeated the word blocks to herself, noting how the driver's L sound was much clearer than hers would have been. She also noticed how he said everything with a slight R sound after the V, something she would have to practice. When they finally arrived at her apartment building, the driver pulled up to the curb and announced, "Here we are. You're in a great neighborhood, right on the edge of Central Park. A perfect spot to start your New York adventure." Emily paid the fare, trying her best to pronounce "thank you" with the same clear th sound she had heard in American movies. "Thank you," she said, immediately realizing her mistake. She quickly corrected herself. "The thank you?" This time making sure her tongue was between her teeth for the th sound. As she stepped out of the taxi and looked up at the tall buildings surrounding her, she felt a wave of emotions wash over her: excitement, nervousness, and a touch of homesickness. But most of all, she felt determined. She knew she had a long way to go with her accent, but she was ready for the challenge. Inside her apartment, which was smaller than she had expected, but filled with the warm afternoon light, Emily sat on the edge of her bed and took a deep breath. She thought about the challenges that lay ahead, finding her way around the city, starting her new job, meeting new people, and the excitement that had initially fueled her decision to move here began to waver, but Emily was determined. She reached for her phone and opened a language app she had downloaded before her trip. For the next hour, she practiced the American R sound, repeating words like car, store, and park until they started to feel more natural on her tongue. She focused on curling her tongue back slightly for the R sound, a movement that felt foreign but produced a sound much closer to what she had heard from the New Yorkers she'd encountered. It was hard, frustrating work, but Emily knew it was necessary. She hadn't come all this way to give up at the first hurdle. As the sun set over the New York skyline, casting a golden hue across her room, Emily made a promise to herself. No matter how tough it got, she would keep pushing forward. This city was her new beginning, and she was ready to embrace it, accent and all. Chapter 2. The First Day at Work. The next morning, Emily woke up to the sounds of the city honking horns, distant sirens, and the hum of life just outside her window. Today was the day. She dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that was both professional and comfortable, and practiced her introduction in the mirror. "Good morning, I'm Emily DuPont. I'm the new marketing assistant." She repeated it several times, trying to perfect the American accent she had been working on the night before. She paid particular attention to the way she said morning, making sure to pronounce the R clearly. She also focused on the ND sound at the end of marketing, ensuring it didn't come out as the softer and sound she was tempted to use. The word assistant was tricky. She had to remind herself to stress the first syllable and to make the T sound crisp and clear. The subway ride to her office was a whirlwind of new experiences. The packed train, the sea of unfamiliar faces, the rapid-fire announcements over the intercom. It was all so different from the tranquil bus rides she was used to in France. She held onto the metal pole as the train swayed, mentally preparing herself for what lay ahead. As she walked into the sleek, modern office building, her nerves kicked into high gear. The lobby was buzzing with people, all dressed in sharp suits and speaking in clipped, efficient tones. Emily checked in with the receptionist, who handed her a visitor's badge and pointed her to the elevators. 15th floor, the woman said, her New York accent thick and fast. Emily thanked her and stepped into the elevator, her heart pounding. The doors closed, and as the elevator ascended, she couldn't help but feel a wave of doubt. Would she fit in here? Would her accent make her stand out in a negative way? She shook the thoughts from her mind, determined to make a good impression. When the elevator doors opened, she was greeted by a bright, open office space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. As she walked through the office, she was met with smiles and polite greetings from her new colleagues, but she noticed a pattern. Each time she introduced herself, there was a slight pause, a moment where they adjusted to her accent. "Hi, I'm Emily DuPont, Z New Marketing Assistant," she would say, wincing internally at the way "the" came out as "Z" and how the T in marketing wasn't as crisp as it should be. The first meeting of the day was a whirlwind of introductions, project briefings, and discussions about the company's upcoming marketing campaigns. Emily tried her best to keep up, but she could sense that her accent was creating a barrier. Every time she spoke, she noticed a subtle hesitation from her colleagues as they processed her words. "I think this campaign as potential," she said during a discussion, immediately regretting how think had come out as sink and had lost its H sound entirely. She made a mental note to practice these sounds later. During a break, Emily found herself exploring the office. She passed by the break room where a few employees were chatting casually over coffee. She noticed terms like conference room and meeting on the office doors, and she tried to familiarize herself with the professional lingo, paying close attention to how her colleagues pronounced these words. At lunchtime, Emily joined a group of coworkers in the company cafeteria. The conversation flowed easily among them, with jokes and anecdotes being shared in rapid succession. When there was a lull, Emily seized the opportunity to ask, "Where can I find a good cafe nearby?" Her colleague, a cheerful woman named Rachel, looked at her quizzically. "Cafe?" Rachel repeated, tilting her head slightly. "Oh, you mean a coffee shop? There's one around the corner." Emily blushed, feeling a mix of embarrassment and frustration. "Yes, a coffee shop," she corrected herself, making a mental note to adjust her vocabulary as well as her pronunciation. It was a small mistake, but it highlighted just how much she still had to learn about the nuances of American English. She noticed how Rachel pronounced coffee with a clear aw sound, different from the O sound Emily would have used. Rachel continued, "If you're looking for something to eat, there's a great deli nearby that has the best bagels and espresso." Emily listened carefully to how Rachel pronounced deli with a clear E sound and bagels with a long A sound, different from how she would have said them. Later that day, Emily found herself in a one-on-one meeting with her boss, Mr. Johnson. He was a tall, imposing man with a kind demeanor, but Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being scrutinized. As they discussed a new marketing campaign, Mr. Johnson asked for her opinion on the color scheme. Emily hesitated, carefully choosing her words. "I think the colors are a bit too bright," she said, her French accent slipping through despite her best efforts. She immediately realized her mistakes. Think had become sink, though I had turned into z, and both bit and bright had come out with an E sound instead of the correct short I and long I sounds. Mr. Johnson looked puzzled for a moment. "You think the colors are a bit too bright?" he asked, gently correcting her pronunciation. Emily nodded, feeling a sense of defeat wash over her. She had been so focused on getting the words right, but her accent had betrayed her once again. As the day came to a close, Emily sat at her desk, reflecting on her first day. It hadn't gone as smoothly as she had hoped, but it was a start. She knew that mastering the American accent wouldn't happen overnight, but she was determined to improve. The city, the job, the people, they were all new, and she was still finding her footing. That evening, as she rode the subway back to her apartment, Emily made a list of words and sounds she needed to work on. The thief sound in think and thee, the short I in bit, the long I in bright, the R sound in words like marketing and corner. She was determined to tackle each of these challenges, one sound at a time. As she walked into her apartment, Emily reminded herself of the promise she had made to keep pushing forward, no matter how tough the journey might be. Tomorrow was a new day, and with it, another opportunity to get one step closer to mastering the accent of success. Chapter 3. Finding a Friend. The morning sun filtered through the tall buildings as Emily hurried to work, her thoughts consumed with the day ahead. She was determined to make progress, both in her job and in mastering her American accent. But despite her best efforts, the challenges of adapting to a new culture weighed heavily on her. Every conversation, every interaction, felt like a test she wasn't quite passing. It was during one of these tense mornings that Emily met Sarah. Sarah was a bright and cheerful colleague, always quick with a smile and a kind word. She had noticed Emily's struggles and decided to reach out. After all, Sarah had been in a similar situation when she first moved to New York from a small town in the Midwest. She knew what it was like to feel out of place, to wrestle with unfamiliar words and phrases. One day, as they both stood by the office coffee machine, Sarah struck up a conversation. "Hey, Emily, how's it going?" she asked, her voice warm and inviting. Emily smiled, grateful for the friendly gesture. "It's going. Okay, I guess," she replied, trying to sound upbeat. She focused hard on the ing sound at the end of going, making sure it didn't come out as a simple N. "I'm still getting used to everything here, especially Z-way people talk. It's like a whole different language sometimes." Sarah chuckled, noticing Emily's pronunciation of everything as everything and thee as Z. "I know what you mean. When I first moved here, I felt like I was constantly translating in my head, trying to figure out what people were saying and how to respond. But don't worry, you'll get the hang of it." Emily's shoulders relaxed a bit. It was comforting to know that someone else understood what she was going through. "It's just, every time I speak, I can tell people are trying to adjust to my accent. It makes me feel like I'm not really fitting in." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I've noticed that, but you're doing great. You've got the basics down, but I think what you're struggling with is more about the nuances of the accent, the little things that make American English sound the way it does." Emily tilted her head, intrigued. "What do you mean by nuances?" "Well," Sarah began, "for example, the th sound in words like think or that. It's not a sound you'll find in French, so it takes some practice. We pronounce it by putting our tongue between our teeth and blowing air out gently. Try it with me. Think." Emily hesitated for a moment, then gave it a try. "Sink," she said, her tongue slipping into the familiar pattern of her native language. Sarah laughed, but not unkindly. "Almost. Let's try again, a little slower this time." "Think, think," Emily repeated, carefully positioning her tongue as Sarah had shown her. This time it sounded much closer to the real thing. "Perfect," Sarah cheered. Now try that. Remember to keep your tongue between your teeth. That, Emily said, and though it wasn't perfect, it was a significant improvement from her usual zat. Sarah smiled brightly. See, you're already making progress. Another tricky one is the R sound. In American English, we pronounce it with a bit of a growl. Listen. Red. Red. Emily echoed, trying to curl her tongue back slightly as Sarah had demonstrated. It felt awkward, but it was a start. You're getting it, Sarah encouraged. It takes time, but with practice, you'll get more comfortable with it. And don't worry about making mistakes. Everyone does when they're learning something new. From that day on, Sarah became Emily's unofficial accent coach. They started a routine. Every morning they would walk to a nearby coffee shop before work. And on the way, Sarah would give Emily small challenges to help her practice. Order your coffee in your best American accent, Sarah would prompt as they approached the counter. Emily would take a deep breath and say, "I'll have a large coffee, please," focusing on the R in large and the short O sound in coffee. She made sure to pronounce please with a Z sound at the end, not the S sound she was used to. At first, it was nerve-wracking, but with each repetition, Emily noticed her accent softening. It wasn't just about mimicking sounds. It was about building confidence, about learning to embrace the new identity she was crafting for herself in this bustling, chaotic city. During one of their morning walks, Sarah introduced Emily to some New York City-specific phrases. You'll hear people say subway stop instead of metro station, Sarah explained as they passed by a subway entrance. Emily repeated subway stop, careful to pronounce the A in subway as a long A sound, not the A sound she was tempted to use. And when someone says they're going uptown or downtown, they're just talking about heading north or south in the city. Emily practiced saying uptown and downtown, paying close attention to the way the T in town was almost swallowed, sounding more like a quick D. Emily listened intently, absorbing each new phrase. What about when people say grab a bite? I've heard that a few times. Oh, that just means getting something to eat, usually something quick, Sarah replied. It's a casual way of inviting someone to eat with you. Emily tried the phrase herself. Want to grab a bite? She was pleased with how natural it sounded, though she made a mental note to work on the AI sound in bite, which still came out a bit like beat. Over the weeks, Emily began to look forward to these morning walks. They weren't just practice sessions. They were moments of connection in a city that often felt overwhelming and isolating. With Sarah's help, Emily felt less alone, and more importantly, she started to believe in her ability to succeed here. The small victories in mastering her accent and the new phrases she learned each day filled her with a sense of accomplishment. She was slowly but surely finding her place in New York City, and with a friend like Sarah by her side, the journey felt a little less daunting. Chapter 4. Practice makes progress. Emily was more determined than ever to improve her American accent. She knew that it was the key to fully integrating into her new life, both socially and professionally. Every night, after a long day at work, she would retreat to her small apartment, where she had set up a little study corner by the window. From there, she could see the lights of the city twinkling in the distance, a constant reminder of the vibrant life she was striving to be a part of. She immersed herself in American culture, watching TV shows and movies, mimicking the actors' speech patterns, and repeating lines until they felt natural. She loved watching sitcoms because they were filled with casual, everyday conversations, the kind she wanted to master. Emily would pause scenes to practice specific phrases, repeating them until the rhythm and tone felt just right. "How are you?" she would say, mimicking the upbeat, almost sing-song intonation she heard on screen. She focused on the way how was pronounced with a clear H sound and a diphthong that sounded like ha-oo rather than the simple oo sound she was used to. What's up became another favorite, with its casual, laid-back vibe that was so distinctly American. Emily practiced the glottal stop between what's and up, making it sound like one fluid word, what's up. But it wasn't just about watching and listening. Emily knew she needed to actively practice speaking as well. Sarah had introduced her to the concept of tongue twisters, tricky phrases designed to challenge and improve her pronunciation. She sells seashells by the seashore, and the 33 thieves thought that they thrilled the throne throughout Thursday became her new mantras. At first, these tongue twisters felt like impossible riddles. She would stumble over the words, her French accent creeping in and tangling the sounds. She sells seashells would come out as she sells seashells, with a clear break between sea and shells. The sounds in The 33 Thieves thought that they thrilled the throne throughout Thursday were particularly challenging, often coming out as D or Z sounds instead. But she didn't give up. She practiced them every day, and gradually, the words started to flow more smoothly. She could feel her mouth adjusting to the new shapes, her tongue learning to navigate the unfamiliar sounds. Thus in Seashore became crisper, the sounds in 33 and thrilled more consistent. To deepen her practice, Emily started incorporating common phrases into her daily routine. Each morning, as she greeted her neighbors, she would say, "How are you doing today?" focusing on the smooth connection between the words and the clear D sound in doing. When she didn't catch something someone said, she would ask, "Could you please repeat that?" deliberately slowing down her speech to ensure clarity, especially on the ow sound in could and the E in repeat. And when leaving work, she'd tell her colleagues, "I'm looking forward to it," practicing the natural rise and fall of her intonation and the clear ing sound in looking. At work, Emily began to notice subtle differences. Her conversations with colleagues flowed more smoothly, and fewer people asked her to repeat herself. She found that she could participate more confidently in meetings, her words coming out clearer and more precise. The hesitation she had once sensed in her colleagues was fading, replaced by a newfound ease in their interactions. Her confidence grew as her accent became less of a barrier and more of a bridge to connecting with others. She started to feel like she belonged, like she was truly a part of the team. But the real test of her progress came when Mr. Johnson, her boss, asked her to lead a big presentation. It was a major opportunity, one that could significantly boost her standing in the company, but it also filled her with anxiety. She knew that all eyes would be on her, listening to every word she said. Emily threw herself into preparation. She practiced her speech over and over, focusing on every word, every sound. She recorded herself and played it back, critiquing her pronunciation and making adjustments. She paid special attention to words she knew were tricky for her, like development, making sure the second E was a schwa sound, strategy, focusing on the clear T sound, and initiative, ensuring she stressed the second syllable, not the first, as she was inclined to do. She even enlisted Sarah's help, running through the presentation in front of her and asking for feedback. Sarah pointed out subtle issues, like Emily's tendency to soften final consonants or to add an extra syllable to words ending in a consonant cluster. "You've got this," Sarah said, her voice full of encouragement. "Just remember to speak clearly, take your time, and focus on your pronunciation. You're ready for this." The night before the presentation, Emily could hardly sleep. She lay in bed, going over her speech in her head, repeating the key phrases under her breath. She knew her material inside and out, but the fear of her accent tripping her up still lingered. Chapter 5. The Big Presentation and Beyond. The day of the big presentation had arrived, and Emily could feel the weight of it pressing on her shoulders. As she walked to the office that morning, the usual hustle of New York City felt distant, muted by the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She had practiced her speech countless times, perfecting every word, every sentence, with meticulous attention to her pronunciation, intonation, and pacing. In the elevator ride up to the 15th floor, Emily's mind raced with fears of her accent slipping or mispronouncing something crucial. She took a deep breath, remembering Sarah's advice. Speak clearly, take your time, and focus on your pronunciation. As she began her presentation, Emily made sure to enunciate each word carefully. "Good morning, everyone," she started, focusing on the American R in morning and the soft G at the end of everyone. She paid special attention to problematic sounds. The th sound in thank you and this campaign. The clear L at the end of words like potential and successful. The proper stress on multisyllabic words like marketing, marketing, and strategy, strategie. The reduction of unstressed syllables in words like company, company. As she continued, Emily found her rhythm. She noticed her colleagues nodding along, their expressions attentive and engaged. This was what she had been working toward, being able to communicate her ideas clearly, without her accent getting in the way. When she reached the conclusion, she took a deep breath. In summary, I believe this campaign has the potential to elevate our brand and reach new audiences. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. She made sure to nail the intonation pattern of questions, rising at the end to indicate openness to discussion. The room erupted in applause. Mr. Johnson approached her, smiling broadly. "Emily, that was excellent. You've really improved. Your ideas were clear, your delivery was strong, and I can see that you've been working hard on your accent. Well done." In the weeks that followed, Emily's newfound confidence shone through in every aspect of her work. She no longer hesitated to speak up in meetings or chat with her coworkers. Her boss started entrusting her with more important projects, giving her chances to lead meetings and present ideas to higher-level executives. One afternoon, as she was walking through Central Park with Sarah, they reflected on Emily's journey. The autumn leaves crunched under their feet, a sound Emily had learned to describe accurately in English. "I used to be so nervous about my accent," Emily admitted, carefully pronouncing the V in nervous and the ow in about. "I was always worried that people wouldn't understand me, or that they would judge me for the way I spoke." Sarah nodded. "You've come a long way, Emily. It's not just about losing the accent. It's about finding your voice. And you've done that," Emily smiled, grateful for Sarah's support. "It's funny, isn't it? At first I wanted so badly to sound like everyone else, to fit in. But now I've realized that my accent is part of who I am. It shows where I've come from, but it doesn't define me. I've learned to embrace it, while also mastering the American accent. It's like having the best of both worlds." As they walked back toward the office, Emily reflected on her journey, the challenges she had faced, the fears she had overcome, and the growth she had experienced. Her accent, once a source of insecurity, had become a symbol of her determination and resilience. Emily began mentoring other international employees facing similar challenges. She shared specific techniques that had helped her. 1. Practicing minimal pairs to distinguish similar sounds, e.g., ship versus sheep, bet versus bat. 2. Using tongue twisters to improve articulation, she sells seashells by the seashore. 3. Shadowing native speakers in movies and TV shows to mimic intonation patterns. 4. Recording herself speaking and analyzing areas for improvement. 5. Focusing on the musicality of American English, with its stress-timed rhythm. One day, while having lunch with Pierre, a French friend she had made in New York, he commented on her progress. "You sound like a real New Yorker now," he said with a grin. Emily laughed, her heart swelling with pride. "It's been quite the journey," she replied, making sure to link the words smoothly, as native speakers do. "But I'm proud of how far I've come." As she walked back to the office, Emily felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had taken on one of the toughest challenges of her life and had come out stronger, more confident, and more fluent. Her journey with the American accent had taught her more than just pronunciation. It had shown her the power of perseverance, the importance of embracing one's identity, and the joy of connecting with others across cultural and linguistic barriers. Looking up at the towering skyscrapers, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. She was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with not just improved English skills, but also the confidence to express herself fully and authentically. Her accent, now a blend of her French roots and her American present, told the story of her journey, a journey that had only just begun.